The crayon snapped in half. Not from pressure, but from the way Lily Martinez's small hand trembled as she tried to color inside the lines of a rainbow. Marco Santoro noticed immediately. He always noticed when something was wrong with his students. But this was different. This wasn't the normal frustration of a 5-year-old struggling with fine motor skills. This was fear. "Lily," he said gently, kneeling beside her tiny desk. "You okay, sweetheart?" The little girl didn't look up. Her dark curls fell forward like a curtain, hiding her face. She just kept scribbling with the broken crayon, pressing so hard the paper tore. Marco had been teaching kindergarten at Riverside Elementary for 2 years. 2 years of finger paints and alphabet songs. 2 years of runny noses and scraped knees. 2 years of pretending that Marco Santoro, former underboss of the Santoro crime family, was just another 29-year-old man who loved working with children. Most days, he almost believed it himself. But something about Lily's silence triggered instincts he thought he'd buried. The way she flinched when the classroom door opened. The way she positioned herself in the corner during circle time, back against the wall where she could see all the exits. These weren't normal behaviors for a child who'd been happy and talkative just last week. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Marco had learned to read people long before he ever learned to teach the alphabet. In his former life, survival depended on catching the subtle signs that someone was lying, afraid, or planning to betray you. Those skills didn't disappear just because he'd traded his tailored suits for khakis and polo shirts with the school logo. "Lily," he tried again, this time sitting cross-legged on the floor beside her, so they were at eye level. "Did something happen at home?" She finally looked at him. Her brown eyes were too old for her face, carrying a weight no 5-year-old should understand. Marco's chest tightened. He'd seen that look before, in the mirror, years ago, before he became someone people feared instead of someone who lived in fear. "That man hurt Mommy," Lily whispered, so quietly Marco almost didn't hear her. The classroom suddenly felt too small. The cheerful alphabet border around the walls seemed to mock the darkness of what she'd just revealed. 23 other kindergartners colored and played around them, oblivious to the confession that had just shattered Marco's carefully constructed normal life. "What man, sweetheart?" Marco kept his voice steady, even as his pulse began to hammer. "Can you tell me his name?" Lily's bottom lip trembled. "Mommy said not to tell anyone. She said he'd get mad again." Marco's hands curled into fists against his thighs. He forced them to relax. Children noticed everything, and the last thing Lily needed was to see anger on his face, even if that anger wasn't directed at her. "You did the right thing telling me," he said softly. "I'm your teacher. My job is to keep you safe. Your mommy wants you to be safe, right?" Lily nodded slowly. "Then it's okay that you told me. I promise." The little girl seemed to consider this. Then she reached into her backpack, a pink thing covered in butterflies, and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She handed it to Marco with shaking fingers. It was a drawing. Typical kindergarten art. Stick figures with oversized heads and mismatched proportions. But Marco didn't need artistic sophistication to understand what he was looking at. A woman lying on the ground, red crayon marks around her head. A tall figure standing over her, holding what looked like a bottle. And in the corner, a small figure hiding behind a couch. "This happened last night?" Marco asked, his voice carefully neutral. Lily nodded again. "He came to the door after my bedtime. Mommy told me to hide, but I peeked through the railing on the stairs. He was yelling about papers, about how Mommy can't keep him away anymore." Papers. Legal documents, probably. A custody agreement, a restraining order, something that had expired or been overturned. Marco had seen this pattern before, though in a different context. Men who believed they owned women, who couldn't accept that their control had ended. "Is your mommy okay now?" Marco asked. "She said she's fine, but her face was purple this morning." Lily's voice cracked. "Like when I fell off the swing and got a bruise, but bigger. She put makeup on it before we left for school, but I could still see it." Marco's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He'd spent 2 years trying to leave violence behind. 2 years convincing himself that he could make a difference through teaching, through giving children the stable, safe childhood he'd never had. 2 years believing that his past didn't have to define his future. But some instincts never died. And right now, every cell in his body was screaming that Lily Martinez and her mother were in danger, the kind of danger that required more than phone calls to social services or police reports that might take days to process. Lily, what's your mommy's name? Elena. Elena Martinez. The name meant nothing to Marco, which was good. It meant this wasn't connected to his old life, wasn't some vendetta or power play from the world he'd left behind. This was something else entirely, something somehow more personal. And the man who hurt her, do you know his name? Lily's face scrunched up like she was trying to remember something unpleasant. Mommy called him Ray, but he said his real name is Raymond. Raymond Martinez. He said he's my daddy, but Mommy says my real daddy died before I was born. The pieces clicked together in Marco's mind with sickening clarity. Ex-husband, probably. Violent history, definitely. Recently back in the picture, demanding rights he'd either lost or never deserved in the first place. Marco glanced at the clock. 45 minutes until pickup time. 45 minutes to figure out what he was going to do about the situation that was absolutely none of his business and absolutely everything he couldn't ignore. Mr. Santoro. Lily's small voice pulled him back. Are you mad at me for telling? No, sweetheart. Never. Marco managed a reassuring smile. I'm glad you trusted me. That was very brave. She didn't look convinced. Mommy says if I tell people our private business, they'll take me away from her. They'll put me in a home with strangers. Marco's heart cracked. Elena Martinez wasn't just dealing with an abusive ex. She was dealing with the terror that seeking help would mean losing her daughter. It was a trap that kept so many women silent, suffering in isolation because the system that was supposed to protect them felt more threatening than the abuser himself. That's not going to happen, Marco said firmly. I promise you, Lily. Nobody's going to take you away from your mommy. It was a promise he had no authority to make, but it was also a promise he intended to keep, whatever that required. He thought about his own childhood then, about his father, Salvatore Santoro, who'd ruled the South Side with brutality disguised as family values, about his mother, Maria, who'd learned to hide bruises beneath long sleeves and high collars, who taught Marco that love and violence could coexist in the same house, the same hands. Marco had been 7 when he understood that his father's business meetings involved broken bones and hospital visits. He'd been 10 when he witnessed his first murder. He'd been 15 when his father handed him a gun and told him it was time to prove he was a man. By the time Marco was 23, he'd become everything his father wanted, ruthless, efficient, feared. The perfect heir to a criminal empire built on blood and intimidation. But his mother's death had changed everything. She died of a heart attack at 51. The doctor said it was genetic, unavoidable. But Marco knew better. His mother's heart had been breaking for 30 years, crushed by the weight of loving a monster, of raising a son in a world where violence was currency and compassion was weakness. At her funeral, standing beside her casket, Marco had made a promise. He would leave the life. He would find a way to be different, to use his strength for something other than destruction. It had taken him 4 years to extract himself from the organization. 4 years of careful planning, of training his replacement, of convincing his father that retirement wasn't betrayal. His father had died 2 years ago, a massive stroke that ended Salvatore Santoro's reign in an instant, and Marco had been free. He'd chosen teaching because children represented everything his old life had destroyed. Innocence, hope, the possibility of becoming something better than your worst impulses. Now, looking at Lily Martinez's frightened face, Marco understood why fate had brought this particular child into his classroom. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activities Marco conducted on autopilot. Snack time, story time, free play. He went through the motions while his mind worked through possibilities, strategies, the kind of problem-solving he'd spent 2 years trying to forget he was good at. He watched Lily during free play. She sat alone in the reading corner, not actually reading, just holding a book and staring at the pages. The other children played around her, their laughter and chaos a stark contrast to her stillness. Marcus Chun, one of the more boisterous boys in class, ran over and tried to pull Lily into a game of blocks. She shook her head, pressing herself deeper into the corner. Marcus, confused by the rejection, shrugged and ran off to find another playmate. Marco noticed everything. The way Lily's shoulders hunched when a door slammed in the hallway. The way she barely touched her afternoon snack, even though it was graham crackers with peanut butter, usually her favorite. The way she kept glancing at the clock, as if dreading what would come when school ended. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. During quiet reading time, Marco's teaching assistant, Mrs. Patterson, a grandmother who'd been working at Riverside for 20 years, pulled him aside. "Something's different with Lily Martinez today," she said quietly, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "She's been withdrawn all afternoon. Do we need to call home?" Marco kept his expression neutral. "I had a conversation with her earlier. Family situation. I'm going to speak with her mother at pickup." Mrs. Patterson nodded knowingly. She'd seen this before, the signs of trouble at home that children carried into the classroom like invisible weights. "Let me know if you need anything. That little girl is special. She deserves better than whatever she's dealing with." "She does," Marco agreed. "And she's going to get it." At 3:15, the classroom door opened and parents began trickling in for pickup. Marco greeted each one with his professional teacher smile, made small talk about their children's progress, handed over artwork and papers from their cubbies. He chatted with Marcus Chen's mother about her son's improving handwriting. He reassured Emma Thompson's father that her shyness was normal and she was making friends at her own pace. He congratulated Jacob Williams' grandmother on the boy finally learning to tie his own shoes. All the while, his attention stayed locked on the door, waiting for Elena Martinez. And then she walked through. Marco had met her before, of course, at parent-teacher conferences at the back-to-school night, during morning drop-offs. But he'd never really looked at her. She'd been just another parent in the endless stream of faces, someone he exchanged pleasantries with before moving on to the next student, the next responsibility. Now he saw her clearly. Elena Martinez was probably 32, maybe 33. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Scrubs that marked her as medical personnel. A nurse, maybe, or a medical assistant. She carried herself with the careful posture of someone trying very hard to appear normal, to blend in, to not attract attention. But Marco noticed what she couldn't hide. The way she moved stiffly, like her ribs hurt. The heavy makeup on her left cheekbone that didn't quite conceal the purple-green shadow underneath. The way her eyes darted to the hallway behind her before entering the classroom, checking for threats. She was beautiful, Marco realized. Not in the polished, intentional way of the women he used to associate with, the socialites and models who decorated the arms of powerful men like expensive accessories. Elena's beauty was quieter, more genuine. Even exhausted and injured, even wearing the careful mask of someone in survival mode, there was something luminous about her. Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, not of each other as individuals, but as people who understood what it meant to be afraid. What it meant to hide. "Mommy!" Lily launched herself from the reading corner, her tiny arms wrapping around Elena's legs. Elena's face transformed. The careful mask fell away, replaced by pure maternal love as she knelt down, wincing slightly from the movement, and pulled her daughter close. "Hi, baby girl. Did you have a good day?" "Uh-huh. We did art, and Mr. Santoro read us a story about a brave mouse." Elena glanced up at Marco. Their eyes met again, and this time he saw something else. Shame. The particular shame of a woman who knew her child was witnessing violence and couldn't figure out how to stop it. Marco made a decision that would change everything. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, walking over with a casual smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Could I speak with you for just a moment? About Lily's progress?" Elena's face went pale beneath her makeup. She knew. Of course she knew. Lily had told him something, and now there would be questions, investigations, systems getting involved that she'd worked so hard to avoid. "Of course," she said quietly. "Lily, sweetheart, can you go pick out your jacket from your cubby?" Lily scampered off, and Elena stood up slowly, bracing herself for whatever was coming. Marco led her a few steps away from the other parents still filtering through the classroom. He kept his voice low, his posture relaxed. To anyone watching, they looked like teacher and parent having a routine conversation about academic progress. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm going to be direct with you, because I think you need someone to be direct. Lily told me what happened last night. She showed me a picture she drew. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She looked away quickly, blinking hard. Mr. Santoro, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me, Marco interrupted gently. You need to know that I'm not calling social services. I'm not filing a report. I'm not doing anything that's going to make your life harder or put Lily at risk. Elena's head snapped back toward him, confusion replacing the fear. What? But, Marco continued, I am going to give you my personal cell phone number. And I'm going to tell you that if you or Lily ever feel unsafe, and I mean ever, day or night, you call me immediately. I don't understand. Why would you? Because I recognize what I'm seeing, Marco said simply. And I recognize that sometimes the system that's supposed to help actually makes things worse. So I'm offering you something different. Someone who can help without the paperwork and the investigations and the fear of losing your daughter. Elena stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. You're a kindergarten teacher. I am, Marco agreed. But I'm also someone who understands how to handle dangerous situations. Someone who can make sure you and Lily are protected if Raymond decides to come back. At the mention of Raymond's name, Elena's face went white. How do you? Lily told you his name. She told me enough. And Mrs. Martinez? Marco pulled a business card from his pocket, a simple white card with just his name and phone number. No school logo, no official title. This was a card he'd had made 2 years ago when he first left the organization. A lifeline for people who needed help outside the normal channels. He'd never actually given it to anyone before. I want you to understand something. When I say I can help, I don't mean filing police reports or getting restraining orders that men like Raymond ignore anyway. I mean actual protection. The kind that makes sure he never touches you or your daughter again. Elena took the card with trembling fingers. She studied Marco's face, trying to understand what he was really offering, what he was really saying beneath the careful words. And Marco let her look. Let her see past the friendly kindergarten teacher facade to the man underneath. The man who'd spent 15 years learning how to deal with threats. The man who'd walked away from that life but hadn't forgotten how to navigate it. Who are you? Elena whispered. Someone who keeps his students safe, Marco replied. That's all you need to know right now. Lily bounced back with her jacket, shattering the tension of the moment. Elena quickly tucked the card into her purse, composing her face back into something resembling normal. Thank you, Mr. Santoro, she said formally, for everything you do for Lily. It's my pleasure, Mrs. Martinez. She's a wonderful student. Marco crouched down to Lily's level. Have a great evening, sweetheart. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, Mr. Santoro. Lily gave him a small smile, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all day. They played their roles perfectly. Teacher and parent, nothing more. But as Elena took Lily's hand and walked toward the door, she glanced back once. The look she gave Marco was complicated, gratitude mixed with uncertainty, hope tangled with fear. Marco watched them leave, watched Elena's careful scan of the hallway before they stepped out, watched the way she held Lily's hand just a little too tightly. And he knew with absolute certainty that his quiet life as a kindergarten teacher was about to collide with the violent world he tried to leave behind. Because some promises couldn't be kept with finger paints and story time. Some promises required the skills of Marco Santoro's previous life, skills he'd hoped never to use again. But for Lily Martinez and her mother, he would use them. He would use every tool, every connection, every bit of knowledge he'd accumulated in 15 years of organized crime. Because that little girl had trusted him with her fear. And Marco Santoro, former underboss, current kindergarten teacher, always protector, didn't break promises to children. The classroom emptied. Parents left with their kids. The hallways grew quiet as staff meetings began and custodians started their evening rounds. Marco sat at his desk and pulled out his personal phone. He scrolled through contacts he hadn't called in 2 years. Names that belonged to a different life, a different version of himself. He stopped at one name in particular, Victor Greco, his former second-in-command. The man who'd understood better than anyone why Marco needed to walk away, but who'd also promised that if Marco ever needed anything at all, one phone call would bring the full weight of the Santoro organization back into his life. Marco stared at the name for a long moment, Then he opened a new contact instead. He entered Elena Martinez's information from the school records he had access to. Her address, an apartment building on the west side, not the best neighborhood but not the worst either. Her phone number, her employment information, Lincoln Memorial Hospital, emergency room nurse, night shift rotation. Night shift, which meant Elena worked from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 or 4 nights a week. Which meant Lily was probably with a babysitter during those hours. Which meant Raymond Martinez knew exactly when Elena would be most vulnerable, exhausted from a 12-hour shift, coming home to an empty apartment, too tired to fight effectively. Marco's hands tightened around his phone. He would try to handle this quietly first. No need to bring Victor and the others into it unless Raymond Martinez proved to be more than one man could handle alone. Marco had spent 2 years learning patience, learning to solve problems with words instead of violence. He'd give that approach one chance. But if Raymond showed up at Elena's door again, if he raised his hand to her or frightened Lily one more time, then Marco would stop being the kindergarten teacher who believed in second chances. He would become the man he used to be. And Raymond Martinez would learn what it meant to threaten someone under Marco Santoro's protection. Marco locked his classroom and headed to the parking lot. His car, a modest Honda Civic that fit his teacher persona, sat in the same spot where his armored Mercedes used to park when he visited the old territory. Another life, another version of himself. He drove home to his small apartment on the north side. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for one person. It was nothing like the penthouse he'd owned during his years in the organization. But it was his, bought with clean money, filled with books and lesson plans instead of weapons and surveillance equipment. Or so he told himself. Marco unlocked his apartment and went straight to the bedroom. He pulled his bed away from the wall and pried up a loose floorboard. Beneath it lay a metal box he hadn't opened in 2 years. Inside were the things Marco Santoro couldn't completely leave behind. A Glock 19, cleaned and maintained though never used since his retirement. 2 spare magazines. A switchblade that had been his father's. $5,000 in cash, emergency money, the kind that couldn't be traced. And a black leather address book filled with names and numbers of people who owed him favors, people who could make things happen outside the law. Marco stared at the contents of the box for a long moment. Then he closed it without taking anything. Not yet. He would give a civilized approach a chance first. He would try to solve this problem like a normal person, with conversations and maybe, if necessary, a call to the police. But the box would stay accessible. Just in case. Marco replaced the floorboard, pushed the bed back into place, and sat down at a small kitchen table with his laptop. He opened a browser and began researching. Raymond Martinez, age 37, multiple arrests for assault, domestic violence, drunk and disorderly. 3 years in Stateville Correctional Center for aggravated battery. Released 6 months ago on parole. His parole conditions included staying away from Elena Martinez and any children in her care. There was a restraining order, currently active, not expired like Marco had assumed, which meant Raymond was violating his parole every time he contacted Elena, which meant one call to his parole officer could send him back to prison for the remainder of his sentence. But Marco understood why Elena hadn't made that call. Raymond wouldn't go quietly. He'd make sure she paid for sending him back inside. Men like Raymond always did. Marco dug deeper. He found Raymond's current address, a halfway house on the far south side. His employment, sporadic construction work, nothing steady. His associates, other ex-cons, men with similar records, a network of violence and desperation. This was the profile of a dangerous man. Not dangerous in the organized, calculated way Marco's associates had been. Dangerous in a more unpredictable way. Dangerous because he had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Marco's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Santoro, this is Elena Martinez. I wanted to thank you for your kindness today. Lily hasn't stopped talking about how nice you were to her. It means more than you know. Marco stared at the message. A simple thank you. Nothing about Raymond. Nothing about the offer Marco had made. Just a mother expressing gratitude for someone being kind to her daughter. He typed a response. Lily is a special little girl. I meant what I said earlier. If you need anything, anytime, please don't hesitate to call. 3 dots appeared, indicating Elena was typing. Then they disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a message came through. "Can I ask you something? And please be honest with me." "Of course. Who are you really?" "Because kindergarten teachers don't usually offer the kind of help you offered me today. And the way you looked at me, you've seen this before. You understand things most people don't." Marco considered how to answer. Honesty or deflection? Protection or vulnerability? He chose something in between. "I grew up in a violent home. My mother spent 30 years with a man who hurt her. I watched her suffer and I couldn't stop it. When I see a child going through what I went through, I can't look away. And I've learned some things over the years about how to handle men like Raymond. Things that might help you and Lily stay safe." It was true, every word of it. Just not the complete truth. Elena's response came quickly. "I don't want Lily to grow up like I did. My father hurt my mother for 20 years before she finally got the courage to leave. I swore I would never let a man treat me that way. But Raymond was different in the beginning. He was charming, attentive, caring. By the time I saw who he really was, I was already pregnant, and he was already showing his true colors. I left him when Lily was 6 months old, got the restraining order, moved 3 times to different apartments. I thought prison would be the end of it. But 6 months ago he got out, and he's been circling ever since. Getting closer, getting bolder." Marco's jaw clenched as he read her words. This was escalation. Raymond was building up to something bigger. The pattern was clear to anyone who understood violence the way Marco did. "You need better security," Marco typed. "Better locks, a security camera, maybe a dog. And you need a safety plan for Lily. Someone she can go to if Raymond shows up when you're at work." "I can't afford security cameras. I'm barely keeping up with rent and daycare as it is. And Lily's babysitter is Mrs. Chun from downstairs. She's 73 and sweet, but she couldn't stop Raymond if he really wanted to get in." Mrs. Chun, Marcus Chen's grandmother. The woman Marco had just spoken to an hour ago about her grandson's progress. The connections were building. The web was tightening. "Let me help," Marco typed. "I know people who can install security equipment without it costing you anything. And I can talk to Mrs. Chun, give her some strategies for keeping Lily safe if there's ever an emergency." "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." Marco stared at that question for a long moment. Why was he doing this? Because of a promise to his dead mother? Because of guilt over the violence he'd been part of? Because teaching kindergarten wasn't enough to balance the scales of his past? Or because somewhere in the last 2 years, he discovered that protecting the innocent was the only thing that made him feel human? "Because it's the right thing to do," he finally typed. "And because Lily trusts me. I won't let her down." Elena's response took longer this time. When it came, it was just 2 words. "Thank you." Marco set his phone down and stared out his apartment window at the Chicago skyline. Lights twinkled in the distance, millions of people living their lives, unaware of the predators moving among them. He tried to become one of those unaware people. He tried to forget what he knew about the darkness that lived in certain men's hearts. But Lily Martinez and her daughter had reminded him of something fundamental. You couldn't choose ignorance once you'd seen the truth. You couldn't pretend monsters didn't exist when a 5-year-old girl drew pictures of her mother being beaten. Marco stood up and walked back to his bedroom. He pulled the bed away from the wall again and opened the metal box. This time, he took out the black leather address book. He flipped through pages until he found the name he needed, Tommy Chun. No relation to Mrs. Chun or Marcus, Chun was a common enough name. Tommy ran a security installation company on the south side. Legitimate business, mostly. He owed Marco 3 favors from the old days. Marco would call in one of those favors tomorrow. Elena and Lily Martinez were going to have the best security system money could buy, whether Raymond Martinez knew about it or not. And if Raymond was smart, he would disappear. He would violate his parole somewhere far away from Chicago, somewhere Marco Santoro's reach didn't extend. But Marco suspected Raymond wasn't smart. Men who terrorized women and children rarely were. Which meant the situation would escalate. Which meant Marco needed to be ready. He closed the address book and put it back in the box. But this time, he took out the Glock and 1 magazine. He checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from 1,000 similar inspections, and confirmed it was still in perfect working order. Then he locked it in the safe he kept in his bedroom closet. Accessible but secure. Ready but not visible. Just in case. Marco made himself dinner. Pasta with marinara sauce, simple and quick. He ate while grading spelling tests from his students, trying to maintain some semblance of his normal routine. But his mind kept drifting to Lily's drawing. To the red crayon marks around the stick figure's head. To the small figure hiding behind the couch, watching her world fall apart. No child should have to live like that. Not on Marco Santoro's watch. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. Marco was awake. He was always awake at this hour. A remnant from his previous life when the most important business happened after midnight. He was sitting in his living room, reading a book about child development psychology, when his phone lit up with Elena's number. He answered before the second ring. Elena! Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a whisper, tight with terror. He's here. Outside my apartment. He's been knocking for 10 minutes. Getting louder. I think he's drunk. Marco was already moving, pulling on jeans and a jacket, grabbing his keys. Where's Lily? Asleep in her room. She hasn't woken up yet, but... A loud bang echoed through the phone, followed by Raymond's voice, muffled but audible. Open the goddamn door, Elena. I know you're in there. I'm calling the police, Elena whispered. Do it, Marco said, already out his apartment door and heading for the stairs. But I'm closer than they are. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Do you have a security chain on your door? Yes, and the deadbolt is locked. Good. Don't open it for any reason. If he breaks through, take Lily into the bathroom and lock that door too. I'm coming. Marco ended the call and dialed another number as he ran to his car. Tommy Chin answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. Do you know what time it is? Tommy, it's Marco. I need a favor. Now. The sleep cleared from Tommy's voice immediately. In their world, a call at 2 a.m. meant serious business. What do you need? Security system installation. First thing tomorrow morning. Full package. Cameras, reinforced locks, panic buttons. A woman and her 5-year-old daughter. The X is escalating. Address. Marco rattled off Elena's apartment building as he peeled out of his parking space. Send your best team. And Tommy, I'm calling in one of the three. A pause. Then, understood. Consider it done. You need backup tonight. Not yet, but stay close to your phone. Marco hung up and focused on driving. The streets were empty at this hour, which meant he could push the speed limit without attracting attention. His Honda Civic wasn't built for racing, but he knew how to make it move. His phone rang again. Elena, her voice higher now, barely controlled panic. He's kicking the door. Marco, he's going to break it down. Where are the police? They said 10 minutes. But that was 5 minutes ago and... Another crash, louder this time. The sound of wood splintering. Oh God, the frame is cracking. Elena, listen to me. Marco's voice dropped into the tone he used to use when giving orders during crisis situations. Calm, authoritative, absolutely certain. Get Lily. Go to the bathroom. Lock the door. Push anything heavy in front of it. Do it now. He heard her moving, heard her calling Lily's name softly, trying not to alert Raymond that they were preparing to barricade themselves. Heard Lily's sleepy, confused voice asking what was happening. Mommy, why is that man yelling? It's okay, baby. We're just going to wait in the bathroom for a little bit. Come on. Another crash. This time Marco heard what actually giving way. Raymond's voice came through clearly now, no longer muffled by the door. There you are. We need to talk, Elena. Right now. Marco pressed the accelerator harder. 8 minutes away. Too far. Too slow. He heard Elena's voice, trying to sound calm for Lily's sake but trembling underneath. Raymond, you need to leave. I've called the police. You're violating your parole just by being here. Raymond's laugh was ugly, thick with alcohol and rage. You think I care about parole? You think I care about anything anymore? You took everything from me, Elena. My daughter. My home. 3 years of my life. You took those things yourself when you put me in the hospital. I was trying to teach you respect. You never listened. Always talking back. Always thinking you were better than me. Well, look at you now. Living in this shithole, working nights, raising my daughter to hate me. She doesn't hate you. She's terrified of you. There's a difference. Marco heard the bathroom door close, heard the lock click. Good. Elena was following his instructions, keeping herself and Lily behind as many barriers as possible. But he could also hear Raymond moving through the apartment, his heavy footsteps getting closer to the bathroom. The man was hunting them through their own home. Elena, I can hear you. Raymond's voice was sing-song now, mockingly playful in a way that made Marco's blood run cold. Come out, come out. Let's talk like adults. Let's figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. You need to leave before the police get here. Or what? You'll call that kindergarten teacher who's been making eyes at you? Marco's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Raymond knew about him, which meant Raymond had been watching Elena more closely than anyone realized, which meant this had been building for longer than just last night. I don't know what you're talking about, Elena said, but her voice wavered. Don't lie to me, Raymond roared, and Marco heard something heavy hit the bathroom door. I've been watching you, Elena. I know your schedule. I know who drops Lily off at school. I know that teacher gives you special attention. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't see what's happening? 6 minutes away. Raymond, please. Elena's voice cracked. You're scaring Lily. Daddy. Lily's small voice, barely audible. Why are you being mean? The sound of that frightened child calling Raymond Daddy, because she didn't know any better, because biology connected them, even though he'd never earned the title, made something snap inside Marco. He'd been planning to handle this diplomatically. Talk to Raymond, appeal to whatever shred of reason might exist, maybe even offer him money to leave Chicago and never come back. That plan died in this moment. I'm not being mean, princess. Raymond's voice softened slightly, taking on a fake gentleness that was somehow worse than his rage. I just want to talk to your mommy. Can you open the door for Daddy? Lily, no, Elena said sharply. Stay next to me. But Mommy, he sounds sad. He's not sad, baby. He's angry. There's a difference. Raymond's fist hit the bathroom door again, harder this time. Open this door, Elena. I'm done playing games. For minutes away. Marco's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy Chen, T-Mobilized. We can be at that address in 30 minutes if you need us sooner than morning. Marco typed back with one hand while steering with the other. Stand by. He heard sirens in the distance through his phone connection. The police were finally approaching. But Marco knew what would happen next. Raymond would hear the sirens too. He'd either flee or he'd escalate. Deciding if he couldn't have Elena, nobody could. Men like Raymond always chose escalation. You call the cops on me, Raymond said, his voice suddenly deadly quiet. After everything I've done for you. After I forgave you for keeping my daughter from me. You call the goddamn cops. You broke into my apartment, Raymond. What did you expect? I expected loyalty. I expected you to remember your vows. For better or worse, Elena. Those were the words you said. I also expected not to end up in the emergency room with broken ribs. Guess we're both disappointed. The sirens were getting closer. Marco could hear them through his phone now, could hear Raymond's breathing getting faster, more agitated. You're going to regret this, Raymond said. You and that teacher. Both of you are going to learn what happens when you disrespect me. Mr. Santoro is just Lily's teacher. He has nothing to do with us. He has everything to do with you. I see how you look at him. I see how Lily talks about him. Mr. Santoro is so nice. Mr. Santoro helped me with my letters. Mr. Santoro says I'm smart. She never talks about me like that. Because you've never given her a reason to. The sirens were right outside now. Marco heard them through his phone and through his own car windows. He was only 2 blocks away. He could see the flashing lights ahead, 3 squad cars pulling up to Elena's building. Raymond heard them too. This isn't over, Elena. Not by a long shot. You think the police can protect you? You think some teacher can keep you safe? I'll be back. And next time, there won't be any warnings. Marco heard footsteps running, heard Raymond's retreat through the apartment, heard the sound of the broken front door slamming, with scraping against the damaged frame. He pulled up to the building, just as Raymond burst out the front entrance. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Raymond, wild-eyed and dangerous, realizing someone was arriving. Marco, calm and cold, cataloging every detail of the man's appearance for future reference. Raymond was big, probably 6'2", 220 pounds. The kind of size that had let him intimidate Elena, make her feel small and helpless. He had the thick build of someone who worked construction, muscles layered with the beginning of middle-age weight. His face was flushed red from alcohol and exertion, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. But Marco saw something else too. Recognition flickered in Raymond's expression. He'd been watching Elena closely enough to know who Marco was, what he looked like. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was a message. Raymond sneered at Marco through the car window, pointed at him with 2 fingers like a gun, and mouthed words Marco could read clearly. "You're next." Then he ran, disappearing into an alley between buildings before the police could cut him off. Marco parked and ran into the building, taking the stairs 3 at a time to Elena's second-floor apartment. Police officers were already at her door, one of them trying to push it open against the damaged frame and security chain that still held. "Chicago PD." One officer called through the gap. "Ma'am, are you in there? Are you safe?" Marco showed his ID, his teaching credentials, nothing that would raise questions about his real background. "I'm her daughter's teacher. She called me when the ex-boyfriend started breaking in. Is she okay?" The officer looked skeptical but nodded. "We're trying to establish that now. Sir, you need to step back and let us handle this." "I understand. But her 5-year-old daughter is in there and she trusts me. If you're having trouble getting her to open the door, maybe I can help." The officer considered this, then spoke into the gap again. "Ma'am, there's a Marco Santoro here. Says he's your daughter's teacher. Did you call him?" Elena's voice came back, still shaky but present. "Yes. Yes. Please let him in. Lily will feel safer if he's here." The officers exchanged glances. Then one of them gestured for Marco to approach. "Go ahead, but we're coming in right behind you." Marco stepped up to the damaged door. The frame was splintered where Raymond had kicked it, the wood cracked and hanging loose. The security chain had held, barely, but wouldn't survive another serious assault. "Elena, it's Marco. I'm coming in now, okay?" The chain rattled as Elena unhooked it from the inside. The door swung open, revealing the destruction Raymond had left behind. Furniture overturned in the living room. Picture frames smashed on the floor. The television screen cracked. The apartment looked like a tornado had torn through it. But it was Elena's face that made Marco's hands curl into fists. She'd done her best to clean up before the police arrived, but she couldn't hide everything. Her left eye was swelling, the bruise from this morning darkened by fresh trauma. Her lip was split, a thin line of dried blood at the corner of her mouth. She held herself carefully, one arm wrapped around her ribs like they hurt to breathe. Behind her, Lily peeked out from the bathroom doorway. The little girl's eyes were enormous in her pale face, her small body shaking. When she saw Marco, something in her expression shifted from terror to desperate relief. "Mr. Santoro," she whispered. "You came." Marco moved past the police officers and knelt down to Lily's level, opening his arms. She ran to him, her small body colliding with his chest, her arms wrapping around his neck with the fierce grip of a child who'd been certain she was about to lose everything. "I'm here, sweetheart," Marco said softly, holding her carefully, feeling her heart hammering against his chest like a frightened bird. "You're safe now. I've got you." Lily buried her face in his shoulder and started to cry. Not the loud, dramatic tears of a typical kindergarten crisis, but the quiet, broken sobs of someone who'd been holding themselves together through sheer force of will and had finally found a safe place to fall apart. Marco stood up slowly, still holding Lily, and met Elena's eyes over her daughter's head. He saw gratitude there, yes, but also shame and fear and something else, something that looked like the beginning of hope. The police officers began their questions. "When did Raymond arrive? What did he say? Did he threaten you specifically? Did he have any weapons? Have you been documenting his violations of the restraining order?" Elena answered each question with the weary patience of someone who'd been through this process before and knew it rarely ended with real protection. Yes, she'd been documenting. Yes, she called his parole officer multiple times. Yes, she had copies of all the legal paperwork. No, she didn't know where Raymond was staying now. No, she hadn't seen a weapon tonight, but he'd threatened her before. The officers took notes, took photos of the damage, took statements. They were professional, efficient, sympathetic even. But Marco could see they were already thinking about the paperwork, the processing, the bureaucratic machinery that would slowly grind forward while Raymond remained free to circle back. "We'll put out a warrant for his arrest," one officer said. "Violation of a restraining order, destruction of property, assault. He won't be hard to find. Men like this usually don't go far. They stick to familiar territory." "What happens in the meantime?" Elena asked. "What happens tonight, tomorrow when he comes back? Do you have somewhere else you can stay? Family, friends?" Elena shook her head. "My mother's in Florida. I don't have any other family in Chicago. And I can't afford a hotel." The officer sighed, sympathy genuine but unhelpful. "We'll increase patrols in this area. And you should document everything. Every call, every message, every time you see him anywhere near you. It all helps build the case." Marco knew that wasn't enough. Increased patrols meant a squad car driving by once or twice extra per shift. Documentation meant evidence for after Raymond did something worse. None of it would actually keep Elena and Lily safe. "She has somewhere to stay," Marco heard himself say. All eyes turned to him. "She can stay with me. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, very safe building, security cameras. Lily will feel more comfortable somewhere she knows is protected." Elena's eyes widened. "Marco, I can't." "You can," Marco said firmly. "And you should. Lily needs sleep, you need to feel safe, and this apartment isn't secure anymore." He gestured at the broken door. "That lock won't hold. The frame is compromised. You'd have to barricade yourselves in every night and hope Raymond doesn't come back with something more than his fists." "But you barely know us." "I know enough." Marco's voice softened. "Lily is my student. Her safety is my responsibility. And right now, the safest place for both of you is somewhere Raymond doesn't know about. Somewhere he can't find you while the police do their job." The officers exchanged glances. One of them spoke up. "Ma'am, we can't tell you what to do. But Mr. Santoro is right about the door. It's not secure. If you have somewhere safe to go tonight, we'd recommend taking that option." Elena looked at Lily, still clinging to Marco like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned violent and unstable. She looked at her destroyed apartment, at the broken door that had failed to keep out the man who'd promised to love and protect her 6 years ago. She looked at Marco, trying to read him, trying to understand why a kindergarten teacher would offer this kind of protection, this level of involvement. "Okay," she said finally, "just for tonight, just until I can figure something else out." "Pack a bag," Marco said. "Whatever you and Lily need for a few days. The police can secure your apartment as best they can, but we should leave soon." While Elena moved mechanically through her bedroom, pulling clothes and toiletries into a bag with shaking hands, Marco stayed with Lily. He sat on the floor amid the destruction, and she climbed into his lap, her small body still trembling with aftershocks of fear. "Is Daddy coming back?" she whispered. Marco considered lying, offering false reassurance. But Lily deserved honesty. She'd already seen too much to believe in comfortable fictions. "He might try," Marco said gently, "but he won't get to you. I promise you that, Lily. I'm not going to let him hurt you or your mommy. Are you stronger than Daddy?" The question was so innocent, so purely childlike in its logic. Strength equaled safety in a 5-year-old's world. If Marco was stronger, then Raymond couldn't win. If only it were that simple. "I'm smarter than your daddy," Marco said instead. "And I have friends who can help keep you safe. Your daddy is angry and scared and making bad choices. But he's not going to win. Not this time." Lily seemed to accept this. She rested her head against Marco's chest and closed her eyes, exhausted by terror in the late hour. Within minutes, she'd fallen asleep, the sudden, complete sleep of children who'd reached the absolute limit of what they could endure. Marco held her carefully, this small life that had become his responsibility through nothing more than a kindergarten classroom assignment and a desperate whisper. That man hurt Mommy. He thought about his own childhood, about watching his father brutalize his mother, about the helplessness of being too small to intervene, too young to understand why the person who was supposed to protect them was the source of their fear. He'd promised himself, at his mother's funeral, that he would never let another child feel that helplessness if he had the power to prevent it. Tonight, he had that power, and he would use every bit of it. Elena emerged from her bedroom 20 minutes later with a duffel bag and Lily's butterfly backpack. Her face was composed now, the immediate panic replaced by the exhausted determination of a woman who'd survived worse and would survive this too. "I'm ready," she said quietly. Marco stood carefully, shifting Lily's sleeping weight in his arms. "My car's outside. Let's go." The police officers had finished their documentation. They'd taken photos, collected statements, and placed evidence markers around the broken door. One of them handed Elena a case number and contact information for victim services. "We'll be in touch as soon as we locate Raymond Martinez," the officer said. "In the meantime, stay somewhere safe. And ma'am," he looked at Elena with genuine concern, "get a restraining order upgrade to an order of protection. It carries more weight, and violations result in immediate arrest." Elena nodded tiredly. She'd heard all this before. She knew the system's limitations, as well as Marco did. They left the apartment together, Marco carrying Lily, Elena clutching their hastily packed bags. The police secured what was left of the door as best they could, but everyone knew it was a symbolic gesture. If Raymond came back, that door wouldn't stop him. The drive to Marco's apartment was silent. Elena sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. Lily slept soundly in the back, her small hand still clutching a stuffed rabbit she'd grabbed on their way out. Marco's mind raced through logistics. Tommy Chin would install the security system tomorrow. Today, actually, since it was already past 3 a.m. But Elena couldn't live in that apartment anymore, not really. The sense of safety had been shattered along with the door frame. She'd need a new place, better security from the start, probably a different neighborhood entirely, somewhere Raymond's usual patterns wouldn't lead him. Marco had connections who could arrange that. Friends from his old life who specialized in making people disappear when necessary. It would take time, maybe a week or two, but it could be done. In the meantime, Elena and Lily would stay with him, which meant Raymond would eventually find out where they were, which meant Raymond would come for Marco, which was exactly what Marco was counting on. They reached Marco's apartment building, a secure complex on the north side with controlled access and cameras in every hallway. Marco had chosen it specifically for these features, though he told himself at the time it was just practical safety, nothing to do with his past. Now he was grateful for his paranoia. He carried Lily upstairs while Elena followed with their bags. His apartment looked different seeing it through someone else's eyes. Sparse, masculine, almost sterile in its lack of personal touches. A couch, a television, bookshelves full of child development texts and lesson planning guides. Nothing that suggested the man who lived here had any life outside his job. "The second bedroom is through there," Marco said, nodding toward a hallway. "It's small, but the bed is comfortable. There are clean sheets in the closet. Bathroom is the first door on the right." Elena set down the bags and took Lily from Marco's arms. The little girl stirred briefly, mumbling something about rainbows, then settled back into sleep. "Thank you," Elena said quietly, "for everything, for coming when I called, for giving us somewhere safe to be. For..." She trailed off, emotion threatening to overcome her carefully maintained composure. "You don't need to thank me," Marco said. "This is what anyone should do. But most people don't." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She was too exhausted to hold back. "Most people say they'll help and then disappear when things get hard. Most people don't want to get involved with someone else's drama. This isn't drama, Elena. This is survival. And you're not alone anymore." The tears spilled over. Elena wiped at them angrily, frustrated by her own weakness. "I'm sorry. I'm not usually like this. I'm usually stronger." "You're stronger than you think," Marco said gently. "You protected your daughter. You called for help. You kept fighting even when you were terrified. That's real strength." Elena laughed bitterly. "I let this happen. I married him. I stayed with him longer than I should have. I put Lily at risk by..." "Stop." Marco's voice was firm but not harsh. "Raymond is responsible for Raymond's choices. Not you. You didn't make him violent. You didn't force him to break into your apartment. He did those things because of who he is, not because of anything you did or didn't do." Elena looked at him with those exhausted, grateful eyes. "How do you know exactly what to say?" "I've seen this before," Marco said simply. And I've learned that victims blame themselves because it gives them an illusion of control. If it's your fault, then you can fix it. But that's not how abuse works. The only person who can fix Raymond is Raymond. And he's not interested in fixing himself. Elena nodded slowly, absorbing this. Then she looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully despite everything. She deserves better than this. She does. And now she'll have it. Marco showed Elena to the guest room, a simple space with a double bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out over a courtyard. Safe. Secure. Quiet. Try to get some sleep, Marco said. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. But for tonight, you're safe here. Both of you. Elena nodded, too tired to argue. She carried Lily to the bed and laid her down carefully, tucking the stuffed rabbit into her arms. Then she turned back to Marco. Why are you doing this? She asked again. The real reason. Not just because Lily is your student. Marco considered his answer. He could give her the simple explanation that he cared about his students, that this was the right thing to do. He could deflect and change the subject. Or he could give her the truth. Because I watched my mother suffer for 30 years, he said quietly. Because I was too young and too powerless to stop it. Because I promised her before she died that I would never let another child go through what I went through. Lily whispered to me that Raymond hurt you, and I heard my own voice from 30 years ago, begging someone, anyone, to make it stop. So I'm making it stop. For her. For you. And maybe, in some way, for that little boy I used to be who couldn't save his own mother. Elena's eyes widened. She'd been expecting many possible answers, but not this raw honesty. Not this glimpse into Marco's own trauma. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry you went through that. Me too, Marco said. But maybe it prepared me for this moment. Maybe all of it. Everything I went through, everything I learned, was so I could be here now, when you and Lily needed someone. Elena stepped forward and hugged him. It was brief, careful, the hug of someone who wasn't sure she had the right to initiate physical contact. But it was also deeply grateful, the embrace of someone who'd been drowning and had finally found solid ground. When she pulled back, she was crying again. I won't let you down. We'll be gone as soon as I can figure something out. I won't make this your problem long term. You're not a problem, Elena. You're a person who needs help. There's a difference. She smiled through her tears, then turned and went into the guest room, closing the door softly behind her. Marco stood in his hallway for a long moment, listening to the quiet sounds of Elena settling Lily into bed, the whispered assurances that everything would be okay now, that they were safe. Then he walked to his bedroom and retrieved the metal box from beneath the floorboards. This time, he took out everything. The Glock, the spare magazines, the knife, the cash, the address book. He laid them all out on his bed and stared at the tools of his former life. He tried to leave this world behind. He tried to believe that teaching kindergarten and reading child development books would be enough to balance the scales, to make up for 15 years of violence and intimidation. But Raymond Martinez had made that impossible. Raymond had brought the violence to Marco's doorstep, had threatened someone under Marco's protection, had shown Marco that some problems couldn't be solved with patience and legal procedures. Some problems required a different kind of solution. Marco picked up the address book and flipped to a page he'd avoided for 2 years. Victor Greco's number, his former second-in-command, the man who knew every secret of a Santoro organization, every connection, every resource. One phone call would bring all of it back into Marco's life. The power, the fear, the certainty that came from operating outside the law. But it would also mean admitting that he'd failed, that his attempt to be someone different, someone better, had been nothing more than a temporary illusion. Marco stared at the number for a long time. Then he closed the address book without making the call. Not yet. He would try one more time to handle this himself. He would use his own skills, his own knowledge, without dragging Victor and the others into it. But if Raymond escalated again, if he came anywhere near Elena or Lily, then Marco would make that call. And Raymond Martinez would discover what it meant to threaten the family of a man who'd once ruled Chicago's underworld. Marco locked the weapons back in his safe, keeping only his phone accessible. He set an alarm for 6 a.m. 3 hours of sleep, better than nothing. But before he lay down, he did one more thing. He texted Tommy-chan. Change of plans. Installation happens at my address first. Full security package. Then we'll handle the other location. How fast can you move? Tommy's response came within seconds. We can be at your place by 8 a.m. Full installation done by noon. You expecting trouble? Preparing for it. Better to have and not need. Understood. See you in a few hours, boss. Boss. Tommy still used that term, even though Marco had walked away from the title years ago. Some connections ran too deep to sever completely. Marco set his phone down and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. In the next room, Lily Martinez slept peacefully for the first time in days, safe in the knowledge that her teacher would protect her. In the guest room, Elena finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she found someone who wouldn't let her down. And in his own room, Marco Santoro accepted what he'd been denying for 2 years. You could leave the life. You could change your name and your occupation and your entire world. But you couldn't change who you were at your core. Marco Santoro was a protector. He always had been, even when that protection came with violence and fear. Now he would protect Elena and Lily Martinez with every skill he possessed, every connection he'd maintained, every hard lesson he'd learned in 15 years of organized crime. Raymond Martinez had made the mistake of threatening the wrong family, and he was about to learn why that was the last mistake he'd ever make. Marco closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. He was already planning, already strategizing, already becoming, once again, the man he tried so hard to leave behind. But this time, he would use that darkness for something good. This time, the monster would protect the innocent instead of preying on them. And God help anyone who stood in his way. Morning came too quickly. Marco woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet voices in his kitchen. He found Elena already dressed, making breakfast while Lily sat at the table coloring with crayons Elena must have packed. "Good morning," Elena said softly. "I hope you don't mind. I needed to do something normal." "Not at all." Marco poured himself coffee and sat across from Lily. "How are you feeling this morning, sweetheart?" "Better," Lily said, not looking up from her drawing. "Your apartment is quiet. No loud noises." The simple statement broke Marco's heart. A 5-year-old shouldn't find silence remarkable. At 8 a.m. sharp, Tommy Chin arrived with his crew. Marco met them in the lobby, keeping his voice low. Full package. Cameras on every entrance. Motion sensors. Panic buttons in the bedrooms. "I want to know if anyone comes within 50 feet of this building." Tommy nodded, understanding more than Marco said. "You got it. This about the axe?" "Yeah. He's escalating." "Say the word, and we handle it permanently." Marco met Tommy's eyes. That was the old way. The easy way. Make someone disappear, and the problem ended forever. "Not yet," Marco said. "But stay ready." The installation took 3 hours. By noon, Marco's apartment was a fortress. Elena watched the process with growing understanding in her eyes. This wasn't normal. Kindergarten teachers didn't have connections to security teams who worked this fast, this thoroughly, this professionally. When Tommy and his crew left, Elena finally asked the question Marco knew was coming. "Who are you really?" Marco could have deflected again, could have maintained the fiction. But Elena deserved the truth. "I used to work in my family's business. We controlled territory on the south side. I was good at my job, too good. When my mother died, I realized I'd become everything she'd feared. So I walked away, got my teaching degree, started over. That was 2 years ago." Elena absorbed this slowly. "Your family's business. You mean organized crime?" "Yes. And now I teach kindergarten. Now I help children learn their letters and tie their shoes. Now I try to be someone my mother would have been proud of." Marco looked directly at her. "But I haven't forgotten what I learned. And I won't hesitate to use it if Raymond comes back." Elena should have been afraid, should have grabbed Lily and run from this revelation. Instead, she stepped closer. "Good. Because I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of wondering when he'll show up next. If you can make this stop, Marco, then please, make it stop." Before Marco could respond, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, already knowing who it would be. "You think you can hide them from me?" Raymond's voice was thick with rage and alcohol. I know where they are, teacher. I know everything about you. Your address. Your schedule. Your cute little classroom with the alphabet posters. You want to play hero? Let's see how brave you are when I'm standing in front of you. Name the place and time, Marco said calmly. Let's have that conversation. Raymond laughed. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know who you are? I did my research, Marco Santoro. Found some interesting stories about your family. But here's the thing, you're retired. You're soft now. You teach children. You're not that man anymore. You're right, Marco said. I'm not that man anymore. I'm worse. Because that man had rules, boundaries, bosses to answer to. I don't answer to anyone now. So when I tell you that if you come near Elena or Lily again, you'll disappear so completely that even the police will stop looking, believe me. Silence on the other end. Then, we'll see about that. The line went dead. Marco looked at Elena. Pack your things. I'm moving you somewhere safe while I handle this. No. Elena's voice was firm. We're not running anymore. Lily and I stay here. Together. Whatever happens, we face it together. Marco wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes. She'd found her strength again. She wasn't a victim anymore. Okay, he said. But you follow my lead. When I tell you to take Lily and lock yourselves in the bedroom, you do it. No arguments. Agreed. That night, at 11:30, Marco's new security system alerted him to movement outside his building. He checked the camera feeds and saw Raymond approaching, a crowbar in his hand. Marco was ready. He met Raymond in the lobby, alone, the camera angles carefully arranged to show Raymond as the aggressor. Last chance, Marco said quietly. Walk away. Leave Chicago. Never contact Elena or Lily again. Do that, and you live. Raymond sneered. Oh, what? You'll kill me. You're not that guy anymore, remember? No, Marco said. I'm better than that guy. I'm the version who learned patience, who learned that fear is more effective than death. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to violate your parole somewhere far from here. Because if you don't, I won't kill you. I'll destroy you. Your reputation, your connections, your ability to ever hurt anyone again. I know every secret you have, Raymond. Every crime, every person you've wronged. And I have the resources to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Raymond's confidence wavered. He looked at Marco and finally saw what he should have seen from the beginning. Not a soft kindergarten teacher, but a predator who'd chosen mercy. Until now. You're insane, Raymond whispered. No, I'm protective. There's a difference. Marco stepped closer. This is your only warning. Take it. Raymond dropped the crowbar and ran. 3 days later, Marco received confirmation that Raymond Martinez had left Illinois, violating his parole in Nevada. He'd be arrested within the week, sent back to prison to finish his sentence. Elena and Lily stayed with Marco for another week while her apartment was repaired and upgraded. On their last morning, Lily hugged him goodbye. Thank you for keeping your promise, Mr. Santoro, she whispered. You saved us. Marco knelt down to her level. You saved yourself, sweetheart. You were brave enough to ask for help. That's the hardest part. After they left, Marco stood in his quiet apartment and realized something profound. He'd spent 2 years trying to escape his past. But maybe the point wasn't to escape it, it was to use it differently. He couldn't change where he came from. But he could choose what he did with the skills he'd learned. And protecting people like Elena and Lily, that was worth everything. 6 months later, Lily still brought him drawings. But now they showed rainbows and sunshine and happy families. No more red crayon marks. No more figures hiding in corners. Just a little girl who'd learned that asking for help from the right person could change everything. And a former Mafia underboss who'd learned that sometimes the best way to leave violence behind was to use it one last time to protect the innocent. If you love the story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. See you in the next story.